Let's take a look at higher education funding and banking in Pennsylvania next on Behind the Headlines.
This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by Mara Donnelly, my co-host. Mara, welcome to the show.
Hello, Charlie.
It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
We'll try our best not to talk about Charlie Sheehan anything.
I follow him on Twitter.
You do?
I do.
Wow. Well, he's coming back on CBS. We're hoping that before he
Okay.
comes back on CBS that we can get him.
He had a good gig
on the
there.
show
He should
here.
come back.
Yes. Some predictability in his life.
Yeah.
But talking about predictability, we didn't find the normal predictability that we expected in the governor's address. Now, the governor's budget address was filled with a large, whopping surprise, and that was a 54% reduction, depending on how you calculate it, to a 50% reduction in state higher education.
That's true.
And we wanted to talk about this. There was a tremendous amount of conversation about this topic all around Pennsylvania, and we have with us the best person, I think, to talk to us about this, and that's Steve Hicks, the president of ABSCUF.
Hello,
Steve,
how are you?
welcome back. I'm good.
It's good to see you.
Of course, you are the president of the statewide professors faculty that serves at the 14 state-owned universities. And
So you've been busy.
I have been very
Yes.
busy, yes. I've done a couple interviews since March the 8th, yes. So.
Steve, did you ever have any forewarning that the governor was going to propose cutting state higher education by 54% for the state system? And of course, the state-relateds, Pitt and Temple and Penn State and Lincoln were also cut.
Right.
Did you have a forewarning? The chancellor said that he didn't have forewarning when he was asked in hearings on the Hill.
No, I think as you're aware, Charlie, because you do shows like this and you pay attention, the governor kept a really tight lid on what was going on.
That's unusual.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, after
Usually
8
there's
years of the
leaks.
Rendell
Yeah.
administration, it's a very different. Somebody pointed out that he was a prosecutor and he came from the Attorney General's office, so he was used to keeping the lid on things.
So are his people.
And his people
Yeah.
are used to. So that was very different. There wasn't a lot of leaking going on. Even the leadership. Well, I was told some of the leadership didn't see the spreadsheet till after the speech. So that's very unusual too. The chancellor and I spoke the week before, and he was thinking the worst case scenario was a 30% cut. So there was some notion that it would be big, but obviously that's only about half the size of what it turned out to be. So nobody foresaw how big it would be, and that's pretty clear. I think the fact that it didn't distinguish between the state-relateds and the state-owned was a surprise too, because typically there's at least some variance, there's some jostling in that, but both took essentially a 50% cut on the state appropriation, and the difference in those numbers is the additional piece is the stimulus money. We took a bigger piece of stimulus money 2 years ago, and of course we're going to be missing that too, and so will Penn State and the state-relateds.
Well, now that the shock has worn off and everybody's had the opportunity to sit down and actually look at the numbers and what the impact is going to be, from your perspective, what is the impact going to be on coaches and professors throughout the state system?
Well, it's just devastating. In terms of our budget, it's pretty much a 15% cut to our operating budget. Some campuses, the smaller campuses, it's a larger piece. It's a little bit smaller if you're at the larger end of the 14 state-owns, like IUP and Westchester, but it's still around 15%. And you just can't instantly cut off 15% of your operating budget. I know the financial officers have been asked to come up with budgets, and some of them have just said, we can't. It's just inconceivable how you could make this work. I think we are worried about being able to provide our mandate out of Act 195, which says we're supposed to provide a quality and affordable education. And I think on the quality side, we already have been looking at staff and faculty layoffs. I think if this budget passed, we would be looking at more. In fact, last week I received letters from the state system for all 14 campuses indicating that they would be looking at faculty layoffs in the future. So that's a clear effect of the governor's proposal. So we would be short on faculty. You would think the shortening of faculty would mean larger class size, which have grown for years already. Last summer, this Board of Governors put in the moratorium about 60 programs already. You can't imagine that there wouldn't be more program losses and reductions, that students will get a lot less selection in terms of what they can take and what they can major in and what they can explore once they get to college, which is one of the things about going to college, that you learn new things, and I think that's potentially lost. And
well, are the CFOs saying they can't possibly cut the budgets, or they can't possibly cut the budgets without cutting faculty?
They're saying they cannot come up with a formula that makes 15% work. And right now, I know one of the numbers that's been bandied about is a 33% tuition increase, which is the number you would need to fill the hole the governor is creating. But on the other hand, the chancellor in his testimony in front of the Senate said they could do it the other way and cut 2,600 jobs. I'm not sure that math works, but it gives you an idea of the magnitude of the cuts they would have to do. So I mean, we've had increases in enrollment for 13 consecutive years. The chancellor was on TV yesterday saying that IUP's already filled their freshman class for the fall, and a number of other places have had great enrollment numbers and application numbers. I'm sure Millersville, where Charlie's at, is doing well. We're going to have an enrollment increase this coming fall. You can't service those students. You can't give them classes and give them seats and opportunities without having faculty. And so,
well, this goes into what you've been touching on. What are the other effects that this proposed cut would have on the students themselves, Steve? If you were to summarize, what are the effects on the potential effects on students?
Well, gee, Charlie, aren't I here for 15 minutes? What do you mean I have to summarize?
No, you have to summarize that particular part.
Okay. Let's start with the potential tuition increase. One thing I've heard from students over and over again is that any significant tuition increase is going to mean they can't come back. Our students are averaging about a $23,000 debt load when they graduate at this point. Obviously, jacking in, tuition up is going to make that number bigger. A lot of them work a job. Some of them work 2 jobs to try and make it through college. I think that affects our 4-year graduation rate. And clearly you can't work a 3rd job. It can't be done. So I think there's a big negative effect to the governor's proposal in terms of access, that people at the lower end of the economic spectrum are going to have more trouble affording and staying in school. And I think that's a big factor here, because what we do as a university system, our big part of our mission is we provide first-generation college students an opportunity to come get a college education and move beyond where their parents were. That they can, I know one of Charlie's friends was telling me his father was a carpenter and worked 2 jobs to put him through college. And clearly, you know, he's gone on to be a professional and have a career and move into a different, you know, solidly into the middle class and maybe even the upper middle class. And that's what our universities do, is we provide that kind of opportunity to 90% of our students come from the state, 80% of them stay in state when they graduate. Mm-hmm. So this is very much about the Commonwealth and the health of the middle class in a Commonwealth. So I suspect that we're going to be in a position where people can afford. And you know, part of the deal with the governor's budget is he cut FIA too, about 10%. So not only are they cutting the appropriation to the state system schools, but any potential financial-based grants from the state are going to be smaller too. So.
Well, I joked at the very beginning of this that you have been busy, so I know that there's a lot going on. There have already been rallies in the state capitol. What's the plan to try to reverse this in some fashion?
What has APSCF been doing?
Well, that was two questions, and I'll try and break that down.
Because you're not alone in this.
No. A big thing that's happened since March 8th is the students have become much more activated, and we've been working with student leadership and any student pretty much who asks to try and make some things happen. For instance, within about the first 2 weeks after the governor's budget address, every one of our 14 campuses held a rally. Some of them had as many as 1,000 students out and rallying against this. And so that's been a big positive, and we've got lots of good media coverage. On March the 28th, which was the day the Chancellor testified in front of the House Appropriations Committee, we had a rally here in Harrisburg. It was started by a student out of Shippensburg, and I think we had 800, 900 students on the Capitol steps that day with signs, getting their voices heard. We had a lot of good media coverage, and we had a lot of people from the House and Senate come out and want to speak because this was an opportunity to reinforce the voices they were hearing and saying, we don't agree with the governor's plan. We've also been trying to help students get the message through their legislators. We've had a postcard program, and as far as I know, I think we've gotten about 15,000 postcards in the mail, and we're printing up another 5,000 because this isn't over. And if you talk about the future, we're sitting here at a time when we haven't seen what the House is going to do. There's been a lot of good coverage out of the House. Representative Adolph has said he wants restoration for us. Senator Corman has said he wants restoration for us, and that's pretty good when the majority chairs of the appropriations committees are on board with what sounds like a good idea. But I think you all know that it's a long process. We're sitting here now, and we're weeks away from a vote and a final budget. You know that in the words of the Senate hearing, somebody says that 6 guys named Mo and the governor get in a room together and for the conference on all this and put it together. So we're going to keep working until the end to make sure that we come as close as restoring 100% as we can.
And on that note, we'll have to end. It seems like Scott Paterno has been on your payroll. He's constantly saying Penn State doesn't need the money. The state-related, they can raise money on their own, but people are not as willing to give money to Millersville and Shippensburg and Lock Haven because they don't. They think that we get state money. So yeah, it's a different situation, isn't it?
Well, and let me just say, Graham Spanier probably is doing better in fundraising since this announcement. I bet there are a bunch of people opening their checkbook to help him out.
Well, we want you to come back very soon and tell us what's happening with this, Steve. And we'll be right back with the second segment of Behind the Headlines and perhaps an 82-83 budget as well. See you.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a Commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. In this segment, Maura and I are joined by one of Pennsylvania's leading financial experts, James Deitch. Jim, welcome to the show.
Good.
It's nice
Ronnie,
to have
good
you
to
back.
See you. Hi, Maura. Good to see you.
Jim, currently you are the new CEO of TeraVerde Financial.
Yes.
And formerly, you have been the founder and the CEO of Keystone National Bank and of American Home Bank. And there are few people that I know of in Pennsylvania that have more knowledge and have a better understanding of our financial system than you do. And we want to thank you very much for taking some time to share some of your expertise with us in this time of ups and downs regarding
great uncertainty
regarding the economy. Yes, I think that's very, very true, Maura. You want to start?
Sure. I think that one of the biggest issues that's probably confounding many of our viewers is the S&P rating that recently came out. And so could you
Standard and Poor's.
Standard and Poor's. Could you bring it down and explain what sent the Obama administration scrambling when they changed their, what really wasn't a change of the rating? So could you explain a little bit about that to us?
Surely. Well, Standard & Poor's is one of the leading raters of debt and debt securities in the world. And the highest rating they bestow on a creditor is AAA. But they also give an which is where the U.S. government,
is currently rated. Yes.
They also give an indication as to whether that rating of AAA is going to be stable, is increasing, or is declining. And in this case, they've simply stated that the rating is on a declining direction and thus is in danger of falling from AAA to a lower credit rating.
So I think that's probably a little bit confusing for people. I think people thought the rating did change, but they were really sort of rating the rating. They're saying it's at risk. It's at risk of staying at AAA. It may be downgraded to AA, correct?
It may be downgraded, and one doesn't know whether it's a single downgrade or a double downgrade that they may have in mind. But I think the key issue to keep in mind is that S&P in coming out and giving some direction on this is really making a pretty big statement with respect to the credit rating of the United States government. There are 19 other AAA ratings bestowed on governmental units besides the United States, and the U.S. now has the distinction of having the only AAA with a declining comment next to it.
Well, there are those who found this rating change a little suspect, the timing of it a little suspect. What do you think about the timing of it?
Well, it's always interesting. I know the White House certainly did not appreciate first of all, the surprise of it coming out Monday morning, and second of all, I'm not sure they're in agreement with the assessment.
No, clearly they're not.
But this is the same administration that was very critical of the rating agencies for not being proactive in downgrading mortgage debt and the asset-backed securities that were really contributing to the crisis that occurred in 2008. So it's not a convenient timing nor direction for the administration.
I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, Jim. I mean, this is a political leader who, while he was running for president, didn't understand the Laffer curve and didn't understand the very essence of supply-side economics when asked about it by Tim Russert in that New York debate during the primaries. Of course, the current Secretary of State didn't understand it either or know what it was. So we're being led by individuals with it seems with a very skimpy resumes when it comes to understanding economics, but that's another story, isn't it? And it's interesting that all of the president's economic team has gone. They've all gone, with the exception of Mr. Geithner. All of them have left after just over a year. But I guess we should ask, what was this new rating of Standard & Poor's, this new advisory? What does it mean for business borrowing? What does it mean for consumer borrowing? Does it mean anything?
What does it mean for me?
Okay. Well, before we get to that question, we might just talk a little bit about what triggered, in my view, the S&P's coming out with that declining statement. And it really, I think, just accentuates the divide between the Republican House and the Republican leadership and the Democrats and the administration. And the S&P folks are really saying that the prospect for a budget deal, the prospect to really solve the deficit, is unlikely, in their opinion, before the next presidential election. So that gulf of uncertainty is really what declined the downgrade. And to your point, what's going on and how's that affect consumers and businesses? You know, the current economic climate is really one marked with just a tremendous degree of uncertainty. So it's very difficult for business people, it's very difficult for consumers to really know what is going to be the future. How can I plan on making investment? How can I plan on anything that has to do with a stable economic environment? You know, the president, in putting together the budget deal for 2011, agreed that there'll be a continuation of the tax breaks, the Bush tax rates for 2011 and 2012, and that was pulled off the table last week. You know, certainly the combative nature of the administration's response to the Republican budget proposal has just widened that divide. But when you look at it in the context of just the average consumer, just to give you some you know, sense of how big this deficit is, if you took all the mortgage debt in the United States on all the housing units, you'd come up with about $12 trillion.
Wow.
If you take the federal debt at the present time, you're getting pretty close to $12 trillion. To put that on how you might, as a consumer, relate to that, take your mortgage that you have on your house and realize the federal government, without your consent, has put an equal amount of debt on your shoulders, which you're going to pay as a taxpayer, equal to the size of all the mortgage debt in the U.S. That is an extraordinary amount of debt, and it is increasing at an increasing rate. Over $1 trillion last year, and it's going to be over $1 trillion increased again this year.
Well, you know, it used to be that the American dream was to own your own home. And as we know, there's been many challenges lately for so many people, foreclosures. Even the ability to buy a new home for those who can do it has become so challenging. How can, there are some advisors who are even saying, don't buy. I mean, just rent. There's nothing wrong now with renting. It seems that we're going in the other direction of, you know, live modestly. So, you know, what do you think about that? Do you think people should be trying to buy homes? Is it going to ease up on their ability?
Well, I think there's a couple things at work here. First, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty with the direction of prices for homes in the U.S. And it's really, you know, initially it was a phenomena that was very marked in Florida, Arizona, California, Nevada, where you saw 20, 30, 40% declines in home values. Well, Pennsylvania is beginning to see the rate of increase at zero, and in some cases, and some price points, you know, housing is depreciating in Pennsylvania. It's very difficult for a consumer to say, I want to make a large commitment to buy a home if the prospect that I could buy that home next year for less is out there.
Well, I've heard a lot of people not even, I mean, just waiting for short sales and, you know, just not even wanting to buy a home that's on the market. They want it to be in foreclosure or a short sale before they'll buy it because they can get such a bargain on it.
Well, I mean, the overhang of foreclosures, there's about 4 million housing units that are expected to go through foreclosure. And when you think of the number of families in the United States, there's about 125 million family units. So 4 million foreclosures on 125 million family units means roughly 3 out of 100 homes in the U.S., if you drive down the street, are in or about to go into foreclosure. That puts a tremendous amount of downward pressure on prices, simply because forced sale, when a bank takes over that home, you know, the bank's first and most important aspect is to get rid of that real estate at any price.
But what is the role of housing in the overall national economy, Jim?
Well, you know, depending on the statistics you look at, there's somewhere between 10 and 13% of gross domestic product involved in housing, and it's not just construction of the housing, it's the durable goods, the washers, the dryers, the furnishings, you know, the fixtures, all that go in there. And then you've got construction, which is a fairly large employer of people in the U.S. So when housing is curtailed, it has a tremendous impact on both the wealth of consumers, but also the employment of consumers within the housing sector.
Well, what's the best advice you can give to somebody who might be interested in buying a house right now?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, housing. One of the roles that I've had for the last couple of years is a member of the Board of Governors, the Mortgage Bankers Association of America. So we get a lot of information on what's happening with housing affordability policy in all the 50 states. The advice I might give is housing is a particularly good opportunity in the following situations. Number one, if you have a stable job, housing is very affordable because prices have come down and interest rates have remained low. So the cost of ownership is at a very, very good point historically. It's at an affordability index that's close to the historic levels that have ever been in place in the post-World War II era. Right. The second is mortgage finance is out there, and you can get a mortgage, but you need down payment, you need to prove income, you need to have a traditional full documentation mortgage. It's almost going back to the mid-'80s with respect to the underwriting, and it's not a bad thing. So for a consumer that feels comfortable about their employment, that's buying within the bands of affordability, it's a great time to buy a home. The question is, if you plan to hold that home for only 2 or 3 years and you can't take the potential of maybe another year or two of stable or even declining values, then it's probably not a good time. If you're looking to buy for the long term, it's probably a good time. We still remain the only country that builds walls to keep people out. So there's a tremendous amount of demand in terms of the formation of housing, the need for housing units, because there's 1.1 million new family units a year coming into the United States.
In our last minute, there was some talk about the mortgage interest deduction being eliminated in order to try to come up with another source of revenue to address this deficit. What effect would that have on the housing market, Jim?
I don't think the effect would be as big as some of the people that are against eliminating the deduction. I don't think it's as big an impact as some people fear. Many people that are first-time home buyers don't take advantage of it simply because of the standard deduction. They don't have enough deductions otherwise to do that. But when you look at it in the context of the current limitations on it, if you eliminate the deduction and lower rates, that's a good thing. If you eliminate the deduction and simply take that money out of people's pockets, that's probably not a good thing. And the one piece of advice for the administration that I would have is you need a stable tax climate where people can plan and go forward. One of the things that is really deterring borrowers from buying a new home is they don't know whether or not that deduction is going to be there.
Okay, well, thanks for the information about housing, and we wish you great success with TeraVerde.
Okay.
And we will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new segment of Behind the Headlines, a brand new show, and we want you to go and check our show out at YouTube and check us out on The Voice of PA, and we'll see you again next week.